Hey there again, everybody. This week's topic is on imperialism. We're finishing up this topic this week, next week with a assessment next week. And we're going to see how trends change in Europe as they start to, in a way, kind of take over and control more parts of the world, and how things changed in the 1800s versus before this. So last time we looked at kind of the idea of colonialism, of how Europe kind of moved to parts of the world. It was led by trade. We call it joint stock companies, these groups that went around and made these companies and went to, United States or India or wherever and got goods and those kind of things to trade in Europe. And so they trade their goods for local people, from local people. So example would be tea in Asia, slaves in Africa, and really didn't see this in the Americas necessarily because that was more about control as we talked about with Columbus and all that kind of stuff. And so here's an example of Africa prior to the 1800s. So it's kind of where the Europeans were. Portuguese trading stations here and right along here. And basically, it's all about trade. There were no European people anywhere inside Africa. By the 1800s, this all starts changing, essentially. We shift to what's called imperialism. And it's a switch to direct government control. Instead of being a company or a trading post, it's now a direct piece of land that's directly ruled by the European government. It happens in 700s, 1800s, and essentially, what European countries do is they start installing white leaders into these colonies, or make what's called protectorate. So essentially, they would make a deal with local leader for control. So maybe the local leader, chief guy, whoever it is, makes a deal with the European guy. They sign a treaty, and then the leader gets some out of it, but they also have to do what the white leader says to do, what the European white guy leader says to do. And so essentially, the European group trying to put a sphere of influence over a certain area. It still appears independent, but it's really not because the Europeans are behind the walls, if you will, kind of pulling the strings and everything. And so basically, we have European control of people in other places, namely Africa and Asia. It's not just trade anymore. Instead, it's going to be controlling what people do, how they talk, how they live, how they eat. All those kind of things are part of it. We see full industries out of these places, mines and plantations to grow goods, to mine ores and for lead and iron and steel, those kind of things. We see docks set up for trade. The local population is basically made to work in these places. So people before farmers are now wage laborers working in mines and on plantations, those kind of things. Um, and we basically get class systems set up in parts of the world where they did not exist before. Maybe India with the caste system becomes more of a European class system now, where they say that European class gets kind of put on top of the Indian caste system. In Africa, a system that did not exist now has class systems. And the biggest thing is that these European countries use military power, probably modern weapons like guns and machine guns and steam engines, all that kind of stuff to control the people. And so it's kind of where a big shift happens that way. And essentially, we have this big scramble for territories. European countries send explorers out to claim big chunks of Africa and Asia as well. These guys, well, they make a treaty with the local ruler. They claim big areas of land. Some of these areas of land are bigger than the parent country, excuse me, and they claim these lands for Europe. So here's an example. Here's a map of Africa in late 1800s, and you can just see how different places are being controlled here. So you have the English here controlling, Britain controlling big chunks of this over here. We have France controlling big chunks of this over here. Even little individual Belgium, tiny little country in Europe, controls a big, huge section in the middle. Portugal, pretty small country, controls these huge pieces here. These European countries control so much more than they do in Europe, with these big chunks of land. On the same thing here, we have Great Britain has influence in these big areas here in India, in Bangladesh, in the Middle East. Portugal is involved down in here. You have the Netherlands involved in the Dutch East Indies. You have France involved in modern day Vietnam and Thailand, those kind of places. The U.S. is involved out here in the Philippines, so on and so forth, in Asia as well. Now, the question is, what does this mean? We're going to talk in class on Wednesday about why this happens, okay, why this actually goes down. But the question is, what is the result of it, okay? And one of the big results we see is strict treatments of native inhabitants. They were forced to work on plantations, first of all. They were forced to provide goods for the European rulers. So basically, they had to give stuff to the European rulers, whatever it was, and they didn't do that. They were violently punished. Their lands were taken away, used for farms, those kind of deals. And the main goods they really wanted to get was, rubber, use in modern machinery, metals for modern machinery, fruits and vegetables, those kind of things. Here's an example. Well, put on here. And Captain Labar, I'll read this part to you. It says, an example of what is done was told to me up the Ubangi River. This officer's method was to arrive in canoes at a village. The inhabitants, which were invariably bolted on their arrival, these soldiers were then landed and commenced looting, taking all the chickens, grain, etc. out of the houses. After this, they attacked the natives until able to seize their women. These women were kept as hostages until the chief of the district brought the required number of kilograms of rubber. The rubber having been brought, women were sold back to their owners for a couple of goats apiece, so you could continue from village to village until a certain amount of rubber had been collected. And the worst thing by far, I think, was when certain countries wanted to get rubber, especially in Belgium, especially. They would actually, if you didn't bring enough rubber in, you'd lose a hand. And so we didn't provide enough rubber to the Belgians, you'd lose a hand sometimes. So native populations were treated very, very poorly under the system. They also divided things across cultural lines. In Africa, other places like that, cultural lines are very, very important. They basically made borders about thinking about which cultures are where, and also allowed certain groups to rule over other groups, and it led to a lot of conflict. So in Rwanda, example, in the 1990s, there was a huge genocide in Rwanda. We'll talk about a little later on, where um, there were two groups, the Hutu and the Tutsi. The Tutsi were a minority group, Hutu being the majority. But the Belgians who ruled over Rwanda let the Tutsi be in charge of everything. And so because they were in charge of everything, they made all the rules, all the laws, all those kind of things, and made things very, very difficult within Rwanda. And now when Belgium left, the Hutu eventually took over because they're the majority, and in then 1994, as kind of like retribution for this, that the Tutsi were allowed to be in charge, the Hutus massacred about 800,000 Tutsis over that time. In Sudan, Britain ruled what's now called Sudan in Africa, and there were basically Arabs who were lighter skinned and Africans who were darker skinned living in Sudan, and the British put the Arabs in charge. And you still see some violence between the two groups happen today after civil wars have been taking place since about 1965. And there was genocide issues happening in a place called Darfur, where Arabs were attacking the Africans that lived there, and so on and so forth. And so there were definite issues that they didn't divide things correctly around cultural lines, more around political lines more than anything. Also, wars are part of it. Italy tried to invade Ethiopia and basically lost the war and lost that war. About 20,000 Italians were slaughtered because they wanted to take Ethiopia so bad. And the Ethiopians were an independent country all throughout this time period, and Italians lost. The Spanish-American Wars over this in 1898. You guys studied that in U.S. history. And a lot of and when troops did revolt, like the Zulu, who did try to revolt, the revolts were put down because the Europeans had modern weapons like machine guns and basically mowed down these native populations that may have tried to revolt. Industrialization is another big part of it here. Is that in different countries they started colonizing them and started adding European industrial pieces to them. Started bringing in railroads, started bringing modern day cities, building big ports and factories and farms. But the only downside is that the native inhabitants was used as the labor. Now, the thing is, there's a big cultural exchange, though. A lot of times, traditional games and food move back and forth. In fact, today in India, where the national games are polo and cricket, which came from Great Britain, which ruled over India. One of the national dishes in Britain is chicken marsala, which is a inherently Indian dish. Right here is chicken marsala. Down here they give elephant polo. Have a mixture of polo coming from Britain going to India. Religion's changed a lot. You'll see religion change in terms of going from the European religions being brought to African countries, and as a lot of people change to Christianity, Catholicism, so on and so forth. Even people change back and forth. People from India were educated in Great Britain, and vice versa. And so by the end of imperialism, many countries don't get a lot of their independence until way after World War II. So I'm talking 1950s, 1960s, where different countries of Asia and Africa get to have their quote-unquote independence. And so, and after that, there are some issues that take place after that, which we'll talk about more here a little later on. This is a short little intro lecture, guys. All it is here. Based off kind of the imperialism, we're going to talk about why imperialism happens and discuss some of the ideas of imperialism in class. We have one more note sheet next week with a test probably happening next week, guys. So please be ready for that. Thank you very much for your attention today. I appreciate it.